First of all, thanks for coming today. I know it's Friday, but we've got some fun stuff to talk about. Today's topic is focused on how to optimize your membership based on different sales channels. Now, some of you may have a single sales channel. Some of you may have multiple sales channels. And by sales channel, let me be clear that we're going to be talking through the lens of a sales channel, for example, could be your email list. A sales channel could be Instagram. Sales channel could be Facebook, for example. That's what I'm going to be meaning when I refer to sales channels today. And we're going to look at what are the implications of membership signups from different channels and how those metrics that come out of those signups can influence your long-term revenue. Just a quick overview of everything we're going to go through today. So I'm going to cover something called the sales channel effect and how membership revenue can be drastically different for the same plan simply due to where the customers that land on that plan came from. Second, we're going to talk about how to identify the sales channels that are the most profitable for your own program. And we're going to look at how to optimize those channels in a way that puts you in the best position to take advantage of sales channels that prove to be the most profitable for you. And then we're going to look at an example of the long-term implications of return on investment for membership businesses. And I'm going to be talking a lot about the concept of return on investment today. So anytime you hear me say ROI, that's what I'm going to be referring to. And just to be clear, return on investment for our purposes today is simply going to be, it's going to look at your cost, like how much does it cost to acquire a customer, and what is the financial return you realize based off that cost. And I'm going to go through an example that will lay all of this out in detail. But at the end, we're going to do some Q&A. So if you have anything that comes up as I go through this, please drop your questions in the chat. But first, let's talk about the sales channel effect. Now, if let's imagine a situation where we have a membership that has two distinct sales channels. Let's say that the blue line on the graph represents a sales channel that's from social media. Let's call it Instagram. The orange line on the graph would be your sales channel from your email list. So what this graph is doing is going to show you that we did a look from 2018 through year 2022. And this is revenue that was experienced by the same two different plans on two different sales channels. And it looks at a cohort of members who signed up in 2018. So it's year 2018. Both of these plans signed up roughly the same amount of members. And we followed those members' renewals from 2018 into 2022. And we looked at churn rate, we looked at acquisition cost, and we looked at all of the metrics associated with these two particular plans and how things shook out over time in terms of revenue. Now, if we look at this, let's look at the blue line here for a second on the graph. Over the course of the first year, this particular customer spent about $9,200 to acquire the members that they acquired in 2018. On the other hand, the email acquisition cost was around $8,700. So you've got a business that's paying that has expenses to acquire members. So $9,200 acquisition cost on social, $8,700 in 2018 for the acquisition cost on the email list. The average acquisition cost per member on these two plans is slightly different. You'll see the email list acquisition cost is higher and it has a lower churn rate. The average churn rate on the social, the 35%, is quite higher compared to the email list, which is pretty typical. And if you look across sales channels, we've seen cases where revenue over the course of just a year or two can vary by as much as 35%. And this has to do with some of the characteristics of the audience, of how audiences find you, how they find your membership to sign up, what are the needs of that audience, and what are the implications of long-term revenue. So in this case, what we find is that from 2018 into 2022, the email list segment had a 325% return on investment. Now, why is this important? Because obviously both of these sales channels are very profitable. However, when you have multiple sales channels that have multiple metrics associated with them, we want to know that answer the question that says, which sales channels should I invest the most into in order to realize the most revenue from? So in this case, we have a 244% return from our social sales channel, and we had a 325% return from the email sales channel. Now, had we known what the return on investment was projected to be in 2018, we would have had a better outcome of by pursuing the sales channel that had the highest ROI to begin with. And if you just look at what that would have looked like over time, if you had done nothing and had just these two sales channels that existed independently of each other from years 2018 to 2022, you would have had a total profit of roughly $51,000. If you had known upfront that your sales channel for your email list was going to produce such a higher return on investment, you could have moved that additional spend and that additional allocation of your resources toward that email list and had a $58,175 profit. That's a 14.5% difference in ROI just between the differences of the audience makeup between two sales channels. So why is this important? The implications, if you look at across the board with how sales channels, how they affect your membership, is that you always want to be pursuing the one that you're confident that will produce the highest return on investment. And we're going to look at how do you answer those questions? What things do you need to be looking at to answer those questions? And how can you know with confidence that if you make the decision to pursue one sales channel over the other, what is the implication for your program? Is it higher revenue? Is it 12% higher revenue? Is it lower revenue? Those are the questions we're going to answer today. So the first order of business here becomes identifying your sales channels that make the most sense for you. Now, today, if you're here, you probably have a good sense of what your best sales channels or single channel happens to be. Most people have between 1 and 3 sales channels that they operate from. Some people will pursue all 3 equally. Some pursue just one. What's interesting is that they don't always make the choice of which channel to pursue based on the return on investment. They just know that they all happen to be profitable. But if we can answer the question of what's the most profitable, we can maximize revenue here in a way that will be super significant for your program and is going to make you a lot more money over the long term. So to begin with, 3 questions that we want to answer. Where did your traffic come from? How did your traffic get to your site? And what did the visitors who landed on your site do once they were there? This is like the picture we have to somehow paint for ourselves in order to determine what sales channels are the most profitable. Now, there's lots of ways that you could answer these 3 questions. There's lots of things you can do. There's lots of tools available to do these things. But the one I'm going to talk about today specifically, and the one that's probably most accessible for most people, is Google Analytics. Now, Google Analytics is very complex. It has a lot of things it can do. Fortunately, though, for our purposes and the purposes of this conversation, Google Analytics, being able to extract the value out of Google Analytics for what we're trying to do here today is quite simple. And I'm going to walk you through a very simple strategy and break down how you go about answering these 3 questions using Google Analytics and something called UTM parameters. So Google Analytics plus the use of UTM parameters equals deeper insights into your program. So you may have heard of Google Analytics. It's a software tool that you can glean insights into your website activity from. And if you don't know what UTM parameters are, you can think of UTM parameters as being special tags that you can append to your website link. And those tags are passed into Google Analytics in a way that you can then go find what's the traffic on my website? Where's that traffic coming from? How long does that traffic stay on my website? Which plans does my traffic click the most on? What's my highest converting plan? There's lots of things you can do here, but for the purpose of this conversation today, I want to keep it super simple and look at the basic requirements in order to do this for your own program. So let's start with Google Analytics. Google Analytics is great for identifying what the opportunities are for your website. So you can, whether it's conversion rate, whether it's the referral path or what campaign that a user landed on your site from, we can see all these things in Google Analytics and start to draw conclusions about where we spend our investment and where we dedicate our focus when it comes to acquiring members and retaining those members over time. UTM parameters, I mentioned earlier that these are the tags that you can associate with different pages on your website. So you could imagine that if you had traffic coming from, let's say, a newsletter, and let's say you send out 3 newsletters per day, and there is one particular newsletter where you offer a promotion for your membership, and you send that newsletter out, and you see that that day that you generated 15 signups. Well, the first order of business that you would need to take care of is knowing those 15 signups came from someplace. The UTM parameter is a way that you can build a link and put that link in your email, and you can answer the question of which email did this user come from that purchased my membership? Which link in that email did that user click on to purchase my membership? And which email campaign was this membership purchase attributed to? That's a simple example, but you can use UTM parameters in any place where you include a link to your website, to your membership, any place where you want to know more information about where folks are spending time and where they came from. So this is a example of what you've probably seen this and just not been aware of it before. But if you've never seen a UTM parameter, sometimes if you click on like an ad in Google, for example, you may notice that the URL at the top of the screen has a string of characters there, and maybe you don't realize what those things mean. So this is an example of a UTM parameter. And in this shot here, you can see that at the top of the header here, there's all of these different tags. One of those tags is the UTM source. One is the UTM content. And this is one of our customers. And what this customer is able to know that when you click this membership link on their website, this UTM parameter lets this customer know which link on the site was clicked to land on this page and where that site traffic came from. And that naturally lets this customer answer the question is, well, what part of my website sends the most signups to my membership? Now, if you look at UTM parameters, there are about 4 core areas that are important when it comes to membership sales. The first is the source, where are your visitors coming from? The second is the medium, how did the visitors get there? And third is the campaign. Let's say you have an email campaign that you offer a discount on a membership, or you have some promotion that you need to track the progress of. The campaign ID and the UTM parameter set is the identification tag that lets you know what campaign generated this activity. And lastly, we've got content. I'm not going to focus too much on the term piece here because this is mostly used in CPC campaigns, but the content part of the UTM parameter will let you identify which element of your content is clicked on and what that looks like. Let's say you have an email with 3 links in it. And let's say that the second link in your email sent a user to your website, and that user then ultimately bought a membership. You now know for that particular sign up, if you use UTM parameters, you can tell specifically which link generated that member sign up. And this is important because if you're doing lots of different things or you're promoting your membership in a lot of different places, knowing where the signups and where the activity is coming from is the only way you're going to be able to determine which specific channel is demanding more investment, demanding more focus. And if you know these 2 things up front, you are going to see a massive difference in your long-term revenue. Now, I'm going to show you what building a UTM parameter looks like and how you do it. So there's a tool called Google URL Builder. And Google URL Builder is Google's product that you put in your website. You put in the pieces of information that you need to know and how those pieces of information contribute to the overall sales process. And I got an example here that we can watch. So once you're on, by the way, we're going to send out after the webinar a resource list that includes a link to this builder. But this builder, if you're wanting to know where your sales are coming from, how folks are purchasing, this is going to become a very vital tool in your arsenal when it comes to making sure that your ROI is as high as it can be. So you go to the builder, you put your website in. This can, whatever it's the specific page that you need to track activity for. So in this case, it's just the website name. We put our campaign source as the newsletter, and we've got an email as our medium, and we're going to call our link that we're interested in as link 1. And the resulting link that this builder will then spit out is the link that you will actually include in your email copy that you're sending out to your members. Now, whether this is an email link, whether it's a link on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, it can be a link that's anywhere. But as long as you use this tool to build that link, Google Analytics is then going to be able to see when someone clicks on that link, it's going to capture all of that information about that click and allow you to attribute that activity to your membership sales. Now, this is important for a couple reasons, because if you don't use UTM parameters, you could still go to Google Analytics and see some information that tells you what the referring source is. So for example, Google Analytics can tell you if your website traffic is referred from Google. Is it referred from Yahoo? Is it referred from a social network? But that's about as much depth as you're going to get without employing a UTM strategy like we've talked about here. So UTMs are very important because they allow you to go deeper than Google Analytics can go on its own. And what you're going to find is the more you use UTM parameters, over time, as that data begins to build on itself, you're going to have all sorts of insights that you're going to be able to apply directly to know how to best structure your sales program to earn higher revenue. And one of the things that we need to talk about in terms of once you've identified what a potential sales channel is, once you know what your sales channel is, the question becomes is, how do I optimize my program? How do I optimize my website? How do I optimize my offering that aligns best with where that traffic is coming from and along with the tendencies of that traffic? And when we get into this, there's a few key metrics that we need to know in order to determine the thing that we're after here. And the thing that we're after is being able to answer, what is our return on investment for each sales channel that we pursue? And I want to make sure that this sinks in, because we need to be viewing sales channels independently of one another. And when you view sales channels independently and you're able to define metrics independently for those sales channels, that is the way you get to answer the question that determines exactly which sales channel produces the highest return on investment. So the three things that we need to know here for each sales channel that we happen to be pursuing. Number one, what's our acquisition cost? So for example, let's say you run ads on Facebook in order to generate leads. Let's say you run ads on Instagram in order to generate membership signups. These are all costs that you need to keep track of, and you need to know going into this analysis what those costs are, because if we can keep tabs on those costs and we know exactly what those costs are for a month, for a quarter, for a year, we can then make judgments and a clear determination on what our return on investment is. So some of you may not have paid ads that you run. Let's say that maybe your membership sales are organic and you don't have to run ads. You still have costs in the mix here. So for example, whether that's the cost of a platform you use, whether that's the cost of a teammate that you pay to help run your membership. We all have costs, but the ones I want to focus on today would be purely the acquisition cost, the member acquisition cost. What is it costing you to acquire a specific member? And separately, as we look at sales channels individually, each sales channel can have drastically different churn rates for the members who sign up through that channel. For example, typical average churn rates for members who sign up for a membership via an email list are typically within 10 to 12%, versus if you have folks who sign up for your membership on a social platform, maybe they saw an ad, maybe they saw a post, those folks tend to have about a 35% churn rate over time. So that's a significant difference. And the interesting part of this is that typically email subscribers will cost you more to obtain. It will likely cost you more to obtain an email subscriber than it will to obtain a paying customer on Instagram or Facebook. And a lot of people at the surface may see that and make a determination of sales channels based on what is the acquisition cost. But until we look at the downstream churn over the course of 6 months and over the course of a year, we don't necessarily know how profitable either of those sales channels are without looking at all of these metrics combined. And a lot of people will just simply pursue the sales channel that they see the lowest acquisition source for. The difference between memberships that grow at a rapid clip and memberships that grow or stay steady or grow slower, the ones that grow rapidly are the ones that are able to successfully identify which channel or channels produce the best return on investment. And the key metrics here that we're going to keep track of are all going to wrap up into this calculation of ROI. So I'm going to talk about a strategy where the only way to successfully answer this question when it comes to, okay, I have a monthly plan or a quarterly plan, and both of those plans see signups from Instagram, Facebook, from an email list, from a referral source online. It can be anywhere, but in order to successfully answer the question, we need to set up plans that correspond to each of our sales channels. Now, when we do this, setting up an individual plan that corresponds to the sales channel that you're going to pursue lets you do something that's pretty cool. So first of all, you can monitor your metrics for a specific plan and know that the metrics that you're monitoring correspond to and reflect the activity of someone who came to that plan from a specific source. For example, let's say I have an annual plan, and that annual plan costs $100. We need to know if someone finds my site through Google and buys the membership, and then a different person finds my site through Instagram and buys the same membership, how many years of service do I get from that customer? And what is the associated churn rate? What is the associated acquisition cost? When you set up specific plans in Memberful that correspond to the sales channel that you're pursuing, you can answer all these questions. And we'll talk more about that here in just a minute. But in terms of ROI, return on investment, this is simply your net income divided by the cost of your investment times 100. So net income, that's just, let's say we pay $9,000 we spend $9,000 in paid ads over year one, and we acquire $12,000 in sales from those $9,000 in ads. The net income is $3,000. It's simply the difference between your cost and the revenue you generated. And then we're going to divide that by the cost of our investment and multiply it by 100. And that's going to give us our return on investment. And here's just a simple flow of what this looks like and visually. So let's say these are two separate sales channels. We've got Instagram as a sales channel. We've got email list as a sales channel. If you look at the second box here, plan A and plan A-2, these plans are the same. They offer the same benefits. They're identical in terms of what folks get when they sign up for them. But these are two separate plans that you would create in Memberful. And doing this allows you to measure the Instagram sales channel performance, and you can separately measure the email list sales channel performance. And both of these sales channels are producing acquisition cost, churn rate, and an associated total revenue number. And because we're monitoring these uniquely and independently of each other, we can then determine what is the ROI for my Instagram sales channel and what is the ROI for my email sales channel. Now, today, if you're just getting started out, or whether you've been selling memberships for 4 or 5 years, some of this, if you've not kept track of acquisition costs, or you haven't necessarily took a hard look at your churn rate historically, you can implement this strategy right now and with 100% certainty, start measuring these individual metrics. And I want to show you an example of what this does over time, because if you can get this part right, then it's going to have a significant impact down the line on terms of your total revenue. And you're going to give you're basically going to let that member base that you build in each of these sales channels begin to give it time to compound on each other. And if you can answer the question of return on an investment, which one is it higher for, then you're going to see here in just a second what that does for you. So this is a slide that's just going to cover how significant this becomes. And we're going to look at an example. So in this example, we've got two sales channels. Let's call it sales channel A and sales channel B. Both of these plans both of these sales channels have identical acquisition costs. They both the plans that are involved here sign up 300 members per year. So you're signing up 300 folks per year through sales channel A. You're signing up 300 members per year in sales channel B. Sales channel A has a churn rate of 11.5% annually, and sales channel B has a churn rate of 19% annually. So everything is equal except the churn rates here. So if you look at a projection of over time, how this shakes out and what the implication of knowing which ROI is the highest here. So if we look at year one, both of these sales channels generate the exact same amount of revenue at the end of year one. So we start out at about $6,000 in revenue here in year one. In year three, so as members sign up for this annual membership and as new members are acquired, some members churn out, but as we go out in time, year three, you start to notice a divergence between the sales channel A and sales channel B. And what happens here is because the ROI for sales channel A is so much higher than sales channel B, over time, it makes a huge difference in the amount of revenue that will be generated from that particular sales channel. Now, in terms of real world application here, this is very much in line of the magnitude of difference that you would see between a sales channel on a social network versus a sales channel compared against an email list. This is completely in line here. So you could imagine in the chart here, the blue line could be very representative of an email list sales channel. And by the time we get to year 8, the difference in revenue here is significant. But let's just look at the end of year 10. At the end of year 10, had you known that your email sales channel was so much more profitable than your social sales channel, there's a 26% difference in ROI over the course of that 10 years. So 248,300 compared to 197,500. That is the difference in revenue realized over the course of 10 years between the two sales channels. Now, knowing your ROI up front and knowing what your ROI has been for the last year or for the last 6 months will help you predict and measure the actual amount of income that you know that you're going to receive. So for example, if you know that you have a 10% annual churn rate, then you can say with complete confidence that I'm going to pursue the sales channel with a 10% churn rate. Even though it has a higher acquisition cost, I would rather pursue that channel than the channel that has, a 12% churn rate, but a lower acquisition cost. And the point I want to drive home here is that when you look at over time, small differences in ROI compound year over year over year. And if you stick with it and you continue to acquire members at just the same amount per year. So for example, this example that we looked at, each of these acquires 300 members per year. This is a very conservative estimate of the differences, the magnitude of difference that you can see from a sales channel A based off of another sales channel. So the takeaway here is that with membership specific products, because these payments are recurring, your ROI will actually continue to increase year after year after year, assuming everything else stays equal. So what do I mean by that? We know it in year 10 that our ROI for our sales channel A was 26% higher. In year 11, it would have been probably 30% higher. And each year after that, that ROI continues to expand. And that is exactly how you grow your membership to a level that's not only comfortable for your situation, but that's how you provide yourself with a foundation of growth, is to always be pursuing the sales channel year after year after year that you know has a higher return on investment. And over the course of a few years, these gains really start to compound. So that is the most simplest way to highlight how much a magnitude of difference that we could see just off of a small difference in ROIs per sales channel. So the question that you may have at this point is, okay, what are the next steps? Like, how do I get started with being able to answer all of these questions for everything I'm doing? So there's a few things you've got to do here. First of all, is you would want to make sure your Google Analytics account is activated on your website, and then make sure the Memberful Google Analytics integration is also enabled. And if you don't know how to do that, we have a help doc that talks exactly how to set this up. But that's the first order of business. And the most important part of all of this is making sure you have a unique plan or separate plans that correspond to each separate sales channel that you want to pursue. So for example, if you have an email list, you need to create a plan that only folks from that email list can sign up for. If you also want to sell that plan with those benefits to another group of people, have a second plan with identical benefits set up inside Memberful, and use that plan to send your social traffic to. So there are ways that is the most important part of all of this, is having separate plans for separate sales channels. Once you have that set up, you need to build your UTM parameters to track the events on your site that you're most interested in. At a high level, that's, what is the source of this referral? What was the medium of this referral? So for example, how did they get to my site? We know where they came from, but what's the medium that they took to get there? For an email example, the source would be Gmail, and the medium would be newsletters. So that's going to paint the picture for you in terms of Google Analytics about where the opportunity is, and it lets you answer with confidence, this is where all of my traffic on my site is generated from, and these are the aspects and the attributes that this traffic carries with it that can make my program see very different results. And then lastly, you're going to monitor. We're essentially going to look at this quarter by quarter, year by year. And there's no hard and set rule here, but I would encourage you to monitor your return on investment at least on a quarterly basis. And if you're selling annual memberships, you can certainly monitor it on an annual basis, but the most common that we see folks doing is quarterly and annual. So you can use Google Analytics along with your Memberful Analytics to start to answer, what's the churn rate for this plan? What's the revenue for this plan? And those separate plans are the pieces that will allow you to plug in and answer those questions effectively. And then key takeaways from things we've talked about today. Sales channels have lasting effects on revenue. So in the last example, we saw that over a number of years, the implications of the unique characteristics of revenue mix per sales channel, it can have a lasting impact on revenue, and it can make a big difference in terms of what your total revenue actually happens to be. Your ROI, your return on investment, can vary by as much as 35% across individual sales channels. And knowing that ROI is what is going to allow you to increase your revenue without any additional investment. That's key. So if you're spending $5,000 a year on your marketing efforts, you can spend the same $5,000 per year on the sales channel that produces the highest ROI and realize higher revenue. There's not a lot of ways to do that within a membership where you can increase revenue without any additional spend. So knowing your ROI is the lever that you have available to pull that's going to do that for you. And again, analytics are your friend here. Analytics are important. Without them, everything sort of becomes a guessing game. But yeah, if there's any specific questions that you have after seeing this and through some of the things I've talked about, especially when it comes to analytics, feel free to connect with me after after the webinar, and I'll be glad to chat through, implementing this on a case-by-case basis for your program.